Welcome back. Today I'm going to introduce a general overview or a process for factoring. We've done a lot of factoring. We've worked on our patterns, perfect square trinomials, differences of two squares, and just factoring by grouping and factoring trinomials. But now we want to put in place or make sure we reinforce the process or the order that you want to go through to make factoring a little bit easier, a little bit more orderly, a little bit more organized. So let's begin with our process of factoring. When we're factoring, we want to follow the first rule of factoring, and that is to factor out that greatest common factor. Okay, so if we have something like ax squared plus ax, we want to factor out that GCF. In this case, it's just ax, and we're left with ax times the quantity x plus 1. The second thing we want to do is look for that difference of two squares. We've memorized that pattern, so always look for a difference of two squares. So we have the difference of two squares, 9y squared minus 64, and then we can just factor that to the quantity 3y plus 8 times the quantity 3y minus 8. After we look for difference of two squares, we look for our perfect square trinomials. Now remember, we've got two patterns for PSTs, so always look for that 2 times a times b. For that linear term, we're pretty good at picking out the perfect squares at the beginning and the end. And make sure we know the difference when we have plus 2ab and minus 2ab. So 9x squared minus 6x plus 1. 1 and 9x squared are both perfect squares. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 times 1 times 2 is 6. So we've got a negative 6, so that factors 3x minus 1 quantity squared. The next thing you want to do is look for sum and differences of cubes and follow your patterns for sum of two cubes or difference of two cubes. Okay, so those follow the cube root of a cubed is a, so we have a plus b, see ya buddy, times the quantity a squared minus ab plus b squared. So we have plus, minus, plus our signs, and that ab, not 2ab like the PST, but just a times b for that middle term. And then a cubed minus b cubed, the quantity a minus b, we just copy that minus sign, and then everything is plus plus a squared plus ab plus b squared. If we have a trinomial that's not a PST, then we can go ahead and factor into a pair of binomial factors. And we can do that a couple different ways. We can factor by grouping. We can do the guess and check. That is if our a squared, a is greater than 1. If a is 1, that's usually pretty easy to factor for us. Okay. If we have 4 terms, then we factor by grouping, follow that factoring by grouping process. And finally, when you get all the way through the list, then you want to repeat the process. Look again for the GCF. Look again for differences of two squares. Okay, that dots pattern shows up quite a bit a second time. Okay, and if you didn't factor out your GCF at the beginning, you can always factor it out at the end. Of course, it's easiest to factor it out at the beginning. That wraps up our process for factoring, and we will see you in class.